Our next speaker is Mr. Daniel Assisi. He's an avid Spiritist reader who has spoken about Spiritism both in the United States and abroad. Passionate about education, Daniel works at the California Charter Schools Association and is currently enrolled in the Doctor of Education program in Educational Psychology at the University of Southern California. Daniel is also the Director of Community Relations at Blossom Spirit Society in Los Angeles, an all-volunteer organization in California. Today, he will talk about the importance of work for our spiritual growth.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Can you hear me okay? So, a couple of announcements before we start. The organizers of the event have asked me to try to be dynamic and entertaining because I know you've been here for a while. So they've asked me to change the topic from work to workout. So this side of the room, push-ups. This side's jumping jacks. Let's do it. We even got lights for you. Go. Now, we really thank you for being here. And my task really is to get really metaphysical with you. My job is to talk about work. And it's challenging in a way because it is to talk about something that you do every day and that you're quite familiar with. So I hope that by doing a couple of things here, we can at least light some light bulbs. And if you walk out of here today with at least one new way of looking at the concept of work, I'll call myself successful. And my idea is very simple. I want to make sure we talk about what work is. I want to make sure we talk about outcomes of work. Why do we do this? What's the purpose behind it? I want to talk about the R for rest. Is there rest in work? Should there be? Do we feel guilty about it? Do we feel happy about it? And I also want to talk about some extra knowledge that we might have that might help us work better. Work to work better. So far, so good? And if you guys can withstand the lights, which I've got to be honest, it was me. I just didn't want to make sure you weren't sleeping. So I opened the exit door. But if you bear with me, hopefully we'll get out of here sooner. We'll try to shorten up a little bit. I know you guys have been very patient, and we've run over a little bit of time. So shall we get to work? See what I did there? Okay. All right, so work. What is work? We all do work. Some of us do it to pay your bills. Some of us do it because we really like it. Some of us are looking for work. Others wish they didn't have to work. Right? Whatever it is that we do, work is something that's pretty common to our lives. Yet, I wonder if we really take into consideration the power of work and how it affects our lives. So perhaps there's no better way to start talking about work than to try to define it and see what is it that the dictionary tells us work is. And so when we look into work, we find out that it could be a noun, an adjective, a verb, and there's some definitions there. Hopefully you can see this okay. One is exertion of effort directed to produce or accomplish something, a labor, a toil. That is to say, it has to do with a goal. It has a purpose. The second definition that we get from the Random House Abridged Dictionary is something on which exertion or labor is expended, a task or undertaking, like the students finish their working class. And from that, we get an idea that's also a product, that you come up with something at the end of it. The third line here tells us that it's productive or operative activity. So the sense that we get from this is that it is an activity as well. It's not something that you have to set goals for or that you produce, but you actively do. And last but not least, employment, as in some form of industry, especially as a means of earning one's livelihood, to look for work. And when we see this, we see it's a constant thing that we do, and it becomes a way of doing because we spent quite a bit of time doing this. Hence, a way of being. And this is an interesting perspective for us, because then we should ask ourselves, do we do these four things in our day-to-day life when we think of work? When we leave in the morning and go to work, are we setting about goals to create a product in an activity that is quintessentially related to the way we are or who we are? We should be thinking about this. Because whether we plan or not, it will happen. So if we don't plan the goals, something will come out of it, a product will come out of it, because you're going to do it, because that's who we are. And that's interesting enough for us to start reflecting about the idea of work in general. But hang in there, because the question really is here. That's work in our physical lives. But how does that relate to us, immortal spirits, as well? So one of the first things we must do is ask ourselves, how would the elevated spirits, the wise spirits, define work? Fret not. We can also take care of that. If we look at the Spirit's book, the Law of Labor, the third part of the Spirit's book, when a lot of great things start to come together, we see in question 675, should we understand labor, work, to entail only material occupations? That is to say, is work something we only do in the physical world? You know what the spirits tell us? They tell us, if you could read, I don't know if you can read. No, the spirit labors as much as the body. Every useful occupation is labor. Everything that is useful that you do is work. And here's the really funny part. You thought today, or right now, that I would be doing all the work. But actually, you're doing the work. Because you're engaged in a useful occupation. Well, maybe not during my lecture. But during the previous lectures, if you learned something, you did some work. Isn't that interesting? So anything that you do that is useful to you is labor. And that's a pretty powerful concept if we are to go back to our topic of immortal beings on an earthly journey. Whether we are immortal beings in or not in an earthly journey, every single thing that we do that's useful is work. That kind of changes a little bit of perspective into things, doesn't it? So if we move a little ahead, we will know that it makes sense then that is a law of nature. That we do things to grow in understanding, to be better, to learn. Right? So that changes a little bit of our definition of work. But then the natural question that comes after that is, what does it mean? What is the meaning behind all of this? What is its ultimate goal of work? Why should I care? Right? Well, let's talk about outcomes. Let's talk about the purpose of work. If we think about it, there's really one that develops itself in two different ways, and we'll talk briefly about it. We're going to talk about perfecting our intelligence and evolving in general, which they're kind of related. But if we look at it, and we start again by visiting the Spirit's book, in question 675, we find Kardec asking the spirits again, why has labor been imposed on humankind? Why do we have to do it? And the answer is, it is a means of expiation at the same time as a means of perfecting their intelligence. Without labors, humans would remain in intellectual infancy. The reason why we do things is to grow in understanding, is to become smarter about it. And if you do something many times, you will grow in understanding too. If we didn't do that, we will remain in intellectual infancy for a very long time. We can look at our brothers and sisters, animals, and they always do the same work. Because they lack the intelligence to move it forward, their work is one of subservient. They just do it enough to exist. We, however, on the other hand, have the ability to perfect our intelligence because we've done it for longer and to grow in understanding. So work changes with time. It changes on a personal level, and it also changes on a societal level, a social level. If you look back in history, in the history of our society, you will find that in the beginning we were kind of like this guy over here, just hunting for the basics, right? All we wanted was food. We wanted to exist. Afterwards, we got a little smarter and we built a little farm and we started to produce food at a bigger scale, in which sense we could do more things. Right? We can go out and stop hunting all the time. We can settle. We can grow families besides corn, and we could do great things. And then we got even smarter about it and figured out, hey, there are different things that I want now because I have this extra free time. I want to produce new things. What could I produce? And we go into factories. And now we start building widgets and different things all together, right? And nowadays, a funny thing is we moved away from even producing objects and into services. Isn't it funny that even work itself gets more spiritualized as we go? If before we were treating only your physical body, and then we started just growing food, and then other things for our lives, and now we often deal in things that we don't even see. A banker today oftentimes doesn't touch money. An architect doesn't touch buildings many times. Isn't that interesting? People sell stocks, they make money, they make a living of intangibles that we don't really understand what it is. But our intellect has evolved, and in evolving, it has allowed us to do different things. So there is an evolution process here. There's not only a physical evolution process, but there's also a spiritual evolution process there. As we move forward in our evolutionary process, we do a quick stop to check and see if that really makes sense. When we're talking about work, and we're talking about immortal beings on our earthly journey, we can kind of say that our earthly journey is our work. Much the same way that we come to work on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, and go back home at night, right, every day, and come back the next day. If you think about it, every incarnation that we have is kind of like going to work. Just like we wake up on Monday and go to work, and then we go back to the spiritual world, and here comes Tuesday, and we do it again. And hopefully, we're learning something new every day, and work is getting better, right? So there is a certain component to evolution, to incarnation, to work, right, to our lives. And we see this also in question 132. I'm full of numbers today. It makes me sound so smart. Question 132, the Spirit's book. If I had a British accent, you'll probably believe me even more. What is the purpose of the incarnation of spirits? And then Kardec asked that question, and the good spirits tell us, God imposes incarnation for the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. We kind of innately know this, right? We feel that within ourselves, that we're here to evolve. The interesting thing is that just half of the answer. We often forget about part 2 of the same answer, which goes on and says, incarnation has a further objective, which is to place spirits in situations where they can do their share in the work of the creation. So, not only does God love us so much that it lets us decide how we're going to grow in understanding, when we're going to do it, and what effort we're going to put into it. There's so much love for each and one of us that God almost wants to share its children to everybody else by saying, they're going to do so much great work that their work will positively affect the lives of others. It's like a proud parent saying, my kid can do great things and it's going to help all my other kids. So we have a responsibility as well, not only to ourselves, which is pretty innate and we understand that, but in terms of work and evolution, we also have a certain responsibility to take our part in the creation, to help the world become a better place. And we do that through work. We often forget about this one, because sometimes we're so stuck with our own challenges, which is very understandable, that we forget about this other part. Does that make sense so far? Okay. So, now that we know that we have this greater responsibility, which might be a little daunting at times, right? Because we understand that work is actually pretty different sometimes than what we're setting out to do, and that we actually have some purpose and outcomes in it that relate not only to us but to others. It can get a little tricky. It can get a little overwhelming at times, and we probably all feel it. That's why we should go into the next R, rest. Right? Is there a place for rest after all? Sometimes we feel a little guilty, right? We feel like, oh, I shouldn't rest. I shouldn't stop working. Our identity is so tied in to our livelihood of what we do that we feel bad if we're not doing it. Well, we even talk about retirement. We even talk about stop doing work altogether. But let's look into rest a little bit. If we are making all these considerations, maybe it's time for some reflection. Maybe we can take a little break and enjoy the breeze in your hair, if you had hair. So jealous. Imagine that's a beautiful wind coming towards you, and these are California temperatures. It's a beautiful horizon there. I don't know about you, but when I think about this, one very profound, deep concept comes to my mind. Napping. And if it were me, this is where I would nap. And then it comes to pondering as well. Well, is there a place for rest? Should we feel bad because we rest? How do we figure it out? Well, why don't we ask the good spirits that already gave us great insight into that? And again, in the Spirits book, a great work that it's responsible for all of us being here today, tells us that since rest is needed after labor, certainly also be a law of nature. We talked about law of work being a law. Shouldn't rest be part of it? And the spirits say, absolutely. Rest serves to restore the strength of the body. It also is needed to give a little more freedom to the intelligence, which must raise itself above matter. It's really great because it's a two-part answer, really, right? It talks about our physical bodies needing a rest because we are immortal beings on an earthly journey. But it also says that our minds need a little freedom to be creative and to grow. So when we are resting and we are reflecting, our minds are disengaging from that everyday work that we do, and sometimes we get so trapped in that we can't see out. When we do a productive rest, we can free ourselves from those shackles of everyday life and think about greater things. And then we can be even more productive. We can find new ways of doing things, we can change the way we look at the world, and therefore attain greater productivity. So sometimes to be more productive and to do more work, we need to take a break. We need to use that break productively to let our minds and our bodies rest and re-engage by themselves, because they are amazing things like we saw today, right? And the next natural question is, okay, so when do I know that I should break? How long should I break for? Right? Because otherwise we all want to break all the time. At least I do. I'm still napping over there. If you zoom in, it's probably a picture of me right there. So what is the limit of labor is the next question that the spirits ask. Sorry, that Kardec asked and the spirits answer. And you don't have to trust me. You can go back there and pick up a spirit's book and check by yourself. And they answer, the limits of one's strength. However, in this regard, God leaves people free to decide what their limit is. Again, I find this fascinating. I find it as another proof of the love of God for us. God loves us so much, in so many different ways it's difficult for us to understand, that God lets us decide how hard we will work, how we will do it, how often we will do it. And when we find that we are getting overburdened and overwhelmed, God will let us decide on our own because He trusts us so much that He knows that we're going to be okay. That is the most beautiful proof of love, trusting us to make our own decisions, knowing that we will succeed. So we are in charge of deciding when can we rest. And that's tricky sometimes. We're very demanding on ourselves sometimes. But nevertheless, it's important for us to know that the love of God is always there and that we can do it. So if there is rest, then we really begin to look at retirement a little bit different. The whole idea of working for X number of years and then at the end of our lives stop altogether and do nothing, we know that's probably not going to fly so well with our conscience. Because most of us really want to stop doing our day jobs to do something else, to do other useful occupations, which is also work. So it's not so much retirement, but repurposing. So we repurpose our attention to somewhere else. So we're always working. This is the interesting thing. And as we look in what work is, what it's supposed to do, and how rest can help us be even more productive in the context of work, it's also very important for us to start getting really smart about this and saying, am I working the right way? We get to start thinking about how to work on work. Makes sense, right? We are always working to work better. So are there tips or tricks or advices that we can learn from others that will help us work more effectively in the physical plane or in the spiritual plane? Because they're very similar, because they're all useful occupations and they save their purpose. And we can do that. With some extra knowledge, we can look at least 4 different instances in which we can derive some meaning. We can talk a little bit about Lewis Carroll, about Buddha, about Henry Ford, and yes, about the 7 dwarfs. Hang in there. So, this is a really funny thing, if I may. This was supposed to be a quote by Gandhi. I thought I was going to really impress you putting a picture of Gandhi and a quote of Gandhi in there. And doing some research last night, I found out the quote is actually not by Gandhi at all, which made me really sad because I wouldn't sound as smart. But indeed, it's from Lewis Carroll, a great writer, and it was actually spoken by the Cheshire Cat over here in Alice in Wonderland. That jokeful little guy over there gets asked by Alice in Wonderland, "Where should I go?" "I don't know where to go." And he responds, "If you don't know where you are going, any road will take you there." Isn't that true? Very like Yogi Bear in a way. If the fruits of our, if we don't have goals set to what is it that we're working for, that we want to do with our lives, or engage in for useful occupation, anything we'll do is just fine. Because it's not going to get us there anyways, because we don't know what we want. So it's extremely important that before we set out to do anything, we get very intentional and very clear about what is it that we want to do. We don't do this that often, surprisingly enough. We have a vague idea. But when you wake up in the morning, you say, maybe I want to be a better person. That's a great goal. But how will you do it? How do you know you achieve that? Will you use Benjamin Franklin's virtues? Will you use another method? How will you actually do it? What is your goal and how you're going to make that happen? And that's what Lewis Carroll and Alice in Wonderland can teach us. If anything, when we walk out in the morning, life will take us somewhere. So let's make sure we decide where it's going to take us. Right? The second little tip we can learn here, which makes me sound a lot smarter than the cat, is from Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Buddha said something very smart, meditating. He came across what he called his 4 noble truths, that life is toil and strife and suffering, and that all suffering comes from wanting. If you want something and you don't get it, you suffer. And that if we are able to stop wanting things, guess what? We won't suffer. Truth number 3, right? The 4th noble truth is he gave us a recipe to make that happen. And that recipe was to follow what he called the 8-fold path. 8 things that you got to do to make sure that you curb your ego and become happier. The right view, the right intention, the right speech, the right action, the right effort, the right concentration, the right mindfulness, lots of things, but importantly, the right livelihood. And by that is, choose an occupation, earn your living in something that relates to what you want your goal to be. It's not that complicated, right? But if you have if we are to exaggerate an example, we can say, for instance, if you believe madly in world peace and no violence, then perhaps you should not work for a gun manufacturer, right? Your livelihood should be connected to your goals. Obviously, I exaggerate here, and you could believe in peace through equal use of guns. That's your cup of tea. But whatever it is that you do, we're not here to judge, make sure that you align it to your goals. The way you earn your living should be directly related to what you believe is important, because it will make you happier. And when you do that, something else will also pop into your mind, at least it should. And we take a lesson from Henry Ford, for instance. Ford, a great industrialist, he said, there are 2 types of people who do not interest a good company. Those who do not do what they're told, and those who only do what they're told. And that's a great lesson. If we have a goal and we're aligning our lives to it, then we got to do what we have to do to achieve those goals. But we have to go beyond that. We have to do more than that. We can't just do the absolute minimum towards things. It will take a lot longer. So we have the good judgment, the free will, the ability to not only do what we set ourselves out to do, because we did when we came into this earthly journey, but we have to put some extra effort in there to make sure that we do it better, that we get better at it, and we do it as quickly as we can. So when we look at our work, we can ask, am I doing the absolute minimum, or is there something else I could be doing? Even though it's not asked of me, will relate to my end goal. Is there something I can be doing? And I bet if we look carefully enough, we'll find something. And this one, the seven dwarfs come in. Because if you align your goals with your livelihood and what you're doing, and you are truly looking at how to do this the best possible way, you should be really motivated. If you're motivated, you're whistling while you work. You are happy about the work you do. And the seven dwarfs test is really interesting because if you're not happy at what you do, there's probably a disconnection in there somewhere between your goals and what you want to do and what you're doing. So be joyful in what you do because you're going to spend a great amount of time doing it. So might as well smile, have fun, be happy about it. And maybe you say, Dan, no, I get that, but that doesn't work for everybody. Come on, let's be honest. And I say, yes, it does. It worked for 7 different personality types. It worked for dopey, for bashful, for sneezy, for sleepy, for happy, for grumpy, for doc. All of them just got along. So maybe you're a little bashful or maybe you're a little happy. My wife will probably tell you that I'm on the grumpy side. But, yeah, on the dopey side, she said there in the corner. But it works for all kinds of people. If you bring joy into what you do, and if we are talking about an earthly journey of a part of a bigger immortal journey that we take as spirits, and if we remember that Christ gave us for the good news, happiness and joy, and how to become happy, this is the natural progression of things. This is the Holy Grail for us to truly enjoy what we're doing because God is manifesting everything in the universe so that we can do the best we can to be as happy as we can. And once we look at all those things and take things in a bigger perspective, we realize that we looked at work and what its outcomes are and how we can take some rest and be productive and reflective about it, and what kind of tips, a couple of tips that we can use to be more efficient. But then a light goes off. And I remember that that could be something else. Maybe there's another tip that we can give ourselves that will help us be more productive. And we can use the example of Thomas Edison, the scientist who, among other things, found the right product, substance, to put in the filament of the incandescent light bulb, or what became the light bulb later. This little filament here, that little cord that goes across and comes down, has to be just the right amount of thickness. If it's too thin, the electricity that goes on, inside bursts it, and you can't not have light. If it's too thick, then electricity won't go through, and you won't heat it up, so you won't get light either. So he had to find just the right substance back in the day that would be thick enough and thin enough to resist the electricity, so that as the electricity is passing through, you will shine. Do you guys know how many times he tried to get that right? He tried it over 6,000 times to get it right. Do you remember any of the 6,000 times he failed? No. Do you remember the one that worked? Yes, you do. Isn't that a beautiful reminder that we have to try? And when we try, even if we falter many times, when we get it right, we make light. And it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful concept that we cannot forget. Because sometimes we think it's just going to happen. It's just given to us. And that's why he said, very interestingly, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. So we have to put the work in. We have to have the goals. We have to have the outcomes. We have to reflect upon it. We have to be strategic about how we think we are going to carry it out. But most of all, we have to put the work in. It's akin to what I do sometimes, and I'm very ashamed to say. One of my goals is to win the lottery. But I never play it. But still, I wish I'm going to win one day. Not going to happen, right? A goal without a plan is just a wish. So we have to put the work in. We have to make sure that we do that. And when we do that, when we put our work in, when we really define what is it that we're going to do, what the outcomes of our work should be, and we reflect on how to do it and pause to really think about it and find smart ways of doing it, beautiful things are going to start happening. When we put our perspiration in there, we're going to see that we are beginning to shine. Because everything is pointing that way. And when everything points that way, that beautiful light starts to manifest to us, not only to enlighten our own souls, but like we said before, to fulfill the innate duty that we have to also shed some light on the lives of others. And when we do that, it's almost as if we were plugged in into the universe. And when we are plugged in into the universe, we are plugged in to God. And God serves as that energy for our light bulbs that helps us manifest and potentiate all those beautiful things in ways we can ever even imagine. And what a joyful and fantastic moment that will be when we have all of those lined up and we're working in such a way as to truly use this God's love, this electricity, to make our work shine even brighter. Maybe then we will understand what Jesus said when he was asked by folks, actually accused, for healing people on the Sabbath, the day of rest. And he replied this to those who did not want him to heal people on the day of rest. He said, "My Father has been working until now, and I too am working." So when we do that, and when we see the biggest picture, we understand that work is no longer a chore. It becomes such a pleasurable thing, such a happy thing, in ways that we cannot even begin to realize. And the change that we will have, the impact that we will do in the world, and how fulfilling it will be to us, and how meaningful it can be, it will be the day where work will be no longer work, but a hobby, an interest, and true happiness. We'll be truly close to God. And the fantastic thing about it all is that will be the day when we are all aligned of what we want to do, what we intend to do, how we're going to do it, in such a way as to not only shine some light into us, but those around us, like we said, and in doing so, we'll fulfill our true spiritual nature, whether we are in the immortal plane or on the physical plane. And we'll be truly, truly happy. And then, I thank you in advance then, because the work that you start doing and revisiting how you work today and tomorrow will not only make you happy and benefit you, but will also benefit me as a brother spirit of you. So I thank you for your existence, for the work I know you will do tomorrow, because if you put the perspiration, God has been putting the 1% inspiration for a very long time. He's just waiting for us to pick up our shovels and go out and work. Thank you.